Part 1, Her Voice in the Snow. It's been 3 years since I last saw her. 3 years since Eva disappeared from my life like frost melting off the windshield, slow at first, then all at once. Most people say it ended quietly. A mutual parting. No scandal. No shouting matches. No split furniture or broken glasses. And they're not wrong, not entirely. But absence has a way of making everything feel more peaceful than it was. What they don't know is that it snowed the night she left. Thick, soundless flakes, the kind that hushes the whole world. I sat on the front steps of the cabin with her suitcase beside me, the air bitter on my lungs. She didn't cry. Neither did I. She said, "You're not the man I thought you were." I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. Back then, the cabin belonged to my uncle, tucked deep in the woods of Vermont. We moved there after Eva's miscarriage, something we never talked about. Not in words, anyway. We thought maybe isolation would help us reset. Reconnect. But when the silence between two people grows large enough, even the wind feels like a third party in the room. For a while, I thought she'd come back. That the snow would thaw and I'd hear her voice at the door again. But she didn't. Winter turned to spring. I stayed. Alone. Then, 2 weeks ago, I got a call. Blocked number. A woman's voice I hadn't heard since that night. "James," she said. "I need to see you." It was Eva. My hand tightened around the phone. Why? I can't explain over the phone. It's about something I should have told you. Back then. She sounded different. Softer. Not broken, but frayed at the edges. "You said you were done," I said. "I know. I was. I waited. Please. Just come back to the cabin. I'm already here." She hung up. For hours, I just stared at the phone, unsure if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But the next morning, I packed a bag, threw it in the trunk, and drove 6 hours through sleet and ice until I saw that familiar bend in the road and the outline of the cabin rising out of the trees. The driveway was empty. But the front door was open. Inside, the place looked untouched. Dust on the mantel. Cold logs in the fireplace. The smell of dry wood and old air. "Eva?" I called out. Silence. I moved through the house slowly. Living room. Kitchen. Bedroom. No signs of her. No suitcase. No jacket. No note. I should have turned around. I should have left right then. But I didn't. Because on the kitchen table, placed neatly beside the old tea kettle, was a photograph. Of Eva and me. And our baby. Only, we never took one. And we never had a baby that lived. Part 2, the photograph that shouldn't exist. I stared at the photograph, not breathing. It was us, me, Eva, and a baby. The baby couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Big, dark eyes. A small smile. I was holding him in the crook of my arm. Eva sat beside me, one hand resting on my leg, the other gently cupping the child's head. We were on the porch of the cabin. That same porch, with the same cracked railing and the same moss creeping up the side. But this never happened. We never had a baby. Not one that made it past the first trimester. And we never took that picture. I would have remembered. You don't forget something like that. I turned the photo over. Nothing on the back. No date, no writing, no sign that it had been altered. Just smooth, glossy paper and a version of my life that didn't exist. I sat down at the table, the photo trembling in my hand. What the hell was Eva playing at? The clock ticked in the corner, a sound I hadn't noticed until it was the only thing I could hear. The air felt heavier, colder than it should have been, even for February. I could still see her in my mind, how she looked the last time I saw her, standing at the edge of the driveway with snow gathering in her hair. "You're not the man I thought you were." She'd said it like it was a sentence. Not a statement. Now she was back. Or at least she'd said she was. But where was she? I checked every room again. Nothing had changed. No signs of life, no warmth in the sheets or moisture on the bathroom mirror. The fridge was empty. Her scent was gone, replaced by stale wood and time. But the photo. That was new. That was real. I couldn't leave. Not now. Not until I knew what was happening. So I built a fire, opened a bottle of whiskey I'd left behind, and waited. Night fell fast in the woods. I sat in the armchair facing the fire, the photo on the table beside me. Every so often I'd look over at it, hoping it would shift, dissolve, prove it was fake. It never did. I don't know how long I drifted. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. But sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound. A knock. 3 slow knocks on the front door. I rose quietly, my heart thudding. The fire had burned low, casting deep, flickering shadows across the walls. I crossed the room, each step louder than the last in the cabin's silence. When I opened the door, the porch was empty. But something had been left on the mat. A folded piece of paper. I picked it up with cold fingers, closed the door, and moved back into the light. It was a letter. "James. If you're reading this, it means you stayed. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't be there yet. There are things you don't know. Things I wasn't ready to say." The baby in the photo, his name was Michael. He was ours. I need you to believe that. There's more in the attic. You'll understand soon. Love. Eva. I sat back in the chair, stunned. Michael. A name we never gave. A life we never lived. And yet, there it was. A name. A photo. A promise of more. I finished the whiskey in one swallow and stood. I didn't want to go into the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. We used it for boxes and old things we never unpacked. It always felt too close, too dark. But I had to know. I climbed the narrow stairs, the boards creaking beneath my feet. The attic door opened with a low groan, the air thick with dust and disuse. I stepped inside. And I saw them, boxes. Dozens. Some labeled in Eva's handwriting. Others blank. But one stood out. A small trunk. Wooden. With a faded hospital bracelet looped around the handle. And a single word written in marker on the lid. Michael. Part 3, The Bracelet and the Lie. The bracelet looked real. Thin, plastic, the kind they give newborns in hospitals. I held it up to the light, watching the dust dance around it. The name printed in smudged black ink. Michael Hensley. DOB, October 14, 20. The year was scratched out. Deliberately. I sat down on the attic floor, the cold seeping through my jeans. The trunk beneath me felt like a time capsule. Or a grave. For a long time, I didn't open it. I just stared at the bracelet in my hand, the name repeating in my mind like a cracked record. Michael. Our child, supposedly. The child who wasn't supposed to exist. The one we never held. The one I grieved over in silence while Eva slipped further into herself. Unless, she lied. Or I did. That thought landed like a punch to the chest. Because part of me didn't trust my own memory anymore. Grief does that, it shifts things. Softens edges. Steals clarity. Maybe I had blocked it out. Maybe trauma carved a hole too deep to climb out of. But I remember the doctor's voice. I'm sorry. There was no heartbeat. So then what the hell was this? I opened the trunk. Inside were layers of fabric, baby clothes, folded blankets, tiny socks. All pristine. All unused. And beneath them, photos. Dozens of them. Me and Eva in the nursery we never finished. Eva smiling on a hospital bed. Me holding something wrapped in a white bundle. But the photos were blurry, off-center, like they'd been printed from surveillance footage or memory fragments. Every photo was slightly wrong. In one, I wore a sweater I never owned. In another, Eva's hair was shorter than it had ever been. Our faces looked right. But the context didn't. Like dreams pretending to be real. Beneath the photos was a sealed envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside were 3 folded sheets of paper. Typed. No headers. No dates. Subject's memory has not stabilized. Despite trauma markers, visual recall is inconsistent. Core event remains unconfirmed. Partner, JH, exhibits signs of memory suppression. Possible dissociation due to acute grief. Recommend further observation. Test successful. Phase 2 approved. Subject unaware of event duplication. Subject. Duplication. I read the pages again, slower this time. Every line stripped a little more warmth from the air. It read like a clinical report, about me. About us. And about something that had been done. I didn't understand it. But I understood enough to know that this, whatever it was, wasn't just about Eva leaving. Someone had been watching us. Testing us. And Eva had known. Or been part of it. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't go back downstairs. I sat in the attic with the bracelet looped around my finger and the photos spread in front of me like puzzle pieces that didn't fit together. By morning, I knew I needed answers. Real ones. And I only knew one person who could give them to me. So I drove back into town. Toward the last hospital Eva had visited after the miscarriage. I still remembered the name, St. Adeline's. But when I got there, something felt off. The receptionist was new. Said she had no record of Eva Hensley. No appointments. No ultrasound. No emergency visit. I gave her my name. Same answer. Nothing. She checked again. Nothing. Not even archived. I stood there, stunned, staring at her blank face behind the glass. Are you sure? I asked, voice thin. She nodded. I turned and walked out into the cold. It wasn't just the photos. Or the bracelet. Or the letters. It was everything. Everything was wrong. And as I stepped into the parking lot, I saw a figure across the street. Hood up. Standing still beside a black sedan. Watching me. Just watching. When I looked back a second time, they were gone. But I wasn't paranoid. Because tucked under my windshield wiper was a new note. Folded twice. Handwritten. You're remembering too much, James. Go back before it's too late. Part 4, The Woman in the Mirror. I didn't drive back to the cabin. I sat in the car with the note still in my hand, reading it over and over. The handwriting was careful. Feminine. But I didn't recognize it. Not Eva's. Not anyone's I knew. It was precise, almost practiced. You're remembering too much. Go back before it's too late. The cold had sunk deep into my fingers, but I didn't turn on the heat. Something about the silence in that moment, the wind, the snow melting in small puddles around my tires, felt truer than anything else. I didn't go back. I drove to Eva's sister's place. Nora. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since the funeral. Not since Eva and I had drifted into that unspoken silence after everything fell apart. But if anyone knew the truth about what happened, it would be her. She lived just outside Montpelier in a brick townhouse lined with wind chimes and old bird feeders. I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before knocking. She opened the door, blinked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Maybe she was. James? Hi, Nora. She didn't move. Can we talk? She stepped aside slowly, still in her house slippers, her sweater half buttoned. It's been a long time. I know. We sat at her kitchen table. The kettle whistled behind us, untouched. You're here about Eva, she said. I didn't bother pretending otherwise. She called me. Her face went pale. That's not possible. She called. Asked me to come to the cabin. Said she had something to tell me. Something she should have said years ago. Nora shook her head, backing slightly from the table. James. Eva's not well. What do you mean? She's been in a facility. For almost 2 years. That hit me like a body blow. A facility? I echoed. Nora looked pained, folding her hands in her lap. After she left you, she spiraled. I didn't know how bad it was until she started talking about a child. One she claimed was real. She insisted there had been a second pregnancy. That the miscarriage never happened. That there was a boy. Michael. I said nothing. She brought me a photograph, Nora continued, her voice cracking. Same one you probably saw. You. Her. The baby. But it wasn't real, James. She made it. Or someone gave it to her. She said his name was Michael, I whispered. She believed it, Nora said. She truly did. But the doctors diagnosed her with something called persistent delusional disorder. It was like, she couldn't let go of the life she thought she had. I closed my eyes. It was like the ground beneath me was slipping. She said there was more in the attic, I murmured. That I'd understand. Nora's eyes widened slightly. She said that to me once. Word for word. I opened my coat and pulled out the hospital bracelet, placing it on the table. Nora recoiled. That's hers, she said. She wore that for weeks. Said it belonged to the baby. I thought she'd thrown it away. She didn't, I said. She left it for me. Along with other things. Photos. Documents. Letters. Nora looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something shift behind her eyes. You saw the letter, didn't you? She asked. I froze. Which one? The report. About observation. Memory suppression. Phase 2. I didn't answer. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a key. Small. Brass. Worn at the edges. She gave this to me, she said. Told me never to use it unless I was ready to know what they did to her. Who's they? I asked. She held my gaze. That's what we need to find out. I didn't know what I expected when I left her place that night. But I didn't expect what I found waiting back at the cabin. The front door was wide open. Snow blowing in. And written across the mirror in the hallway, in something thick and red. Stop digging. I didn't call the police. I walked upstairs, heart pounding, fists clenched. The attic door was ajar. Inside, every box, every folder, every photo, gone. All except one thing. A woman's scarf. Pale gray. Eva's. Tied neatly to the rafter like a noose. Part 5, The Things We Don't Remember. I stood in the attic doorway, the cold sinking into my chest, the gray scarf swaying ever so slightly in the draft. For a second, just a breath of time, I thought it might still be warm. As if Eva had just tied it there. As if she were still nearby, watching me from the corner of the room. But there was no one. And everything else was gone. The photos. The baby clothes. The false hospital files. Even the bracelet. Scrubbed clean, like they had never existed at all. Except I knew they had. I'd held them. Touched them. Memorized them. Someone had broken in and taken every trace of that alternate life. Someone who had warned me to stop. But they had left the scarf. Not as a clue. As a message. This was personal. I took it down and sat on the floor, the scarf clutched in my hands like a lifeline. I remembered Eva wearing it the winter before she left, wrapping it around her neck with cold, shaking fingers while I scraped ice off the windshield. That memory felt real. Solid. But now, I questioned everything. What if I had forgotten? What if the miscarriage had been real, but something else had happened later, something I'd been made to forget? The files hinted at memory suppression. Event duplication. Phase 2. Had someone manipulated us? If Eva was in a facility, as Nora said, then how had she called me? Left letters? Notes? Unless she wasn't in there anymore. Or she never had been. I drove back to town that morning and went straight to the facility Nora had mentioned, Shelter Pines Recovery Institute. A sprawling, clinical building nestled in a quiet part of the countryside. The kind of place you pass 100 times and never notice. At the front desk, I asked to see Eva Hensley. The woman behind the glass typed for a long time. Then looked up. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no patient here by that name." I kept my voice calm. She was admitted in late 2021. Possibly under a different name. Could you check her date of birth? The woman hesitated. Do you have proof of relationship? She's my wife, I said. Or she was. A pause. Then, I'll get the director. 10 minutes later, a man in a navy sweater vest and wire-rimmed glasses appeared. Kind face. Too kind. I'm Dr. Carden, he said. Would you walk with me? We strolled slowly down a quiet hallway. The walls were pale green. Soft music playing in the distance. He spoke without looking at me. Eva Hensley was here. For a time. But she was transferred to private care last summer. Off the books. I'm not even supposed to confirm she was ever admitted. Transferred where? He shook his head. I can't say. You don't know, or you won't tell me. He stopped. Finally met my eyes. Both. I held his gaze. Someone left a file in my house. It mentioned observation. Memory suppression. My name was in it. Are you telling me this facility had nothing to do with that? He didn't answer. Was Eva part of a study? Still nothing. I think someone did something to us, I said. To her. I think she's trying to tell me, and someone is trying to stop her. Dr. Carden exhaled. Sometimes people come here with fractured stories. Complicated ones. Sometimes those stories are the mind's way of healing. But what if they're real? I asked. He said nothing. I left with more questions than answers. But I took one thing with me. A name. I had seen it on a chart behind his desk while he stepped away to take a call. Just for a second. Written in red pen across the top of a patient's file. Hensley, E. Alias, Evelyn Cartwright. Status, transferred, Black Hollow Institute. Black Hollow. I'd never heard of it. It sounded less like a medical facility and more like a threat. That night, I returned to the cabin and found my front door unlocked again. This time, nothing was missing. But something had been added. A single piece of paper on the kitchen table. You don't remember what you did, James. But she does. Let it stay buried. Black Hollow doesn't give second chances. No signature. No threats. But the message was clear. Stop digging. Or be buried with her. Part 6, the place they said didn't exist. I didn't sleep. Not even for a second. I sat at the kitchen table all night, staring at the note. Those words, "You don't remember what you did," echoed in my head like footsteps down a hallway I couldn't see the end of. Because what if they were right? What if there was something I did? Something I buried so deep I couldn't find it even when I tried? And what if Eva hadn't? By morning, the cold had settled into the walls. I packed what little I had left in the cabin and took one last look at the place we had once believed might save us. Then I left. I drove south. No real plan, just the name. Black Hollow Institute. I called hospitals. Psychiatric centers. Rehabs. No one had ever heard of it. But the name had a weight to it. Not official, but familiar, like something whispered, not written. I searched maps, directories, even obscure government databases. Nothing. And then I remembered something from my college days. Eva once mentioned her father, a retired psychiatrist, used to refer to certain off-the-grid facilities as Hollow's private retreats for patients deemed too complicated or too dangerous for conventional care. Places with no websites, no phones. Just quiet and fences. Black Hollow wasn't a hospital. It was a disappearance. I drove west. I don't know how I found it. Maybe instinct. Maybe luck. But somewhere between Bar and Montpelier, deep off a back road where GPS failed and the trees thickened like walls, I saw it. A black iron gate. No sign. Just a keypad on a stone column. Behind it, a road winding up into the hills, out of sight. I parked a mile away. Walked through snow and silence, heart pounding with every step. The gate was closed. But someone had been there recently. Footprints. Fresh tire tracks. And then I saw it, a small security camera embedded in the trees. Almost invisible. I stepped closer and looked straight into it. I know Eva's here, I said. I'm not leaving until I see her. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then a quiet buzz, and the gate opened. No voice. No instructions. Just cold steel sliding out of the way. I hesitated, then walked through. The road led up to a facility barely visible from the outside. Modern. Windowless. Low to the ground like it was trying to hide. The building was made of black stone and glass that didn't reflect. There were no signs, no flags, no markings. Just a front door. White. Silent. It opened before I knocked. A woman stood there. Pale suit. Dark hair pulled into a tight knot. Calm. "You're James Hensley," she said. Not a question. Yes. Follow me. She led me down a hallway that felt more like a gallery, white walls, dim lights, no art. The sound of my boots echoed with every step. I tried to speak, but she raised a hand. Not here. We reached a small room. 2 chairs. No table. 1 camera in the ceiling. She closed the door behind us. Then turned to me. "You shouldn't have come. I need to see Eva." She nodded. "You will. But you need to understand what you're walking into." "Was any of it real?" I asked. "The pregnancy? The child? Michael?" Her face didn't change. "What do you remember?" "I remember she lost the baby." "That's not what she remembers." "Then what happened?" She stepped closer. Eva experienced something called induced memory collision. A therapeutic experiment. You agreed to it. So did she. It was designed to rewrite trauma using controlled, shared narrative immersion. What does that mean? It means, she said quietly, you both consented to have your memories altered, to replace your loss with an alternate memory. One where the child lived. I felt the breath leave me. You're saying none of it was real? Not in the traditional sense. But your mind believed it. That was the point. Then why is she here? Because she stopped believing it was false. And me? You were supposed to forget it ever happened. She handed me a small tablet. A video loaded. Me and Eva, sitting in what looked like the same room. A man across from us saying, you'll remember the joy. Not the pain. That's the goal. My voice, if this means she stops blaming herself, I'll do anything. Eva, if I can see him again, even for a little while. I'll take the risk. The screen went black. I sat back in the chair. Everything tilted. She's in room 3B, the woman said. She's lucid. Sometimes. Can I talk to her? She nodded. But it won't go how you think. I need to try. She opened the door. This way, she said. And I followed her down another hallway. To the woman I loved. To the part of my life I had agreed to forget. Part 7, Room 3B. The hallway to Room 3B was colder than the others. Everything in Black Hollow felt designed to erase identity, smooth white walls, no numbers on the doors, no art, no sound. It was like the place was built to house ghosts, not people. The woman guiding me didn't say a word. She simply stopped at a door and turned the handle. 10 minutes, she said quietly. Then she stepped aside. The door creaked open. And there she was. Eva sat in a chair by the window. Her hair was longer now, darker than I remembered. She wore a slate-gray robe and soft slippers, her posture hunched, her gaze turned toward nothing. But she wasn't lost. Not exactly. Just somewhere else inside herself. When she heard me step in, her eyes shifted slightly. And then, slowly, she smiled. A small, sad smile. James. I closed the door behind me. My throat tightened. Hey. She didn't stand. Just watched me, her fingers curled tightly in her lap. You found me, she said. I never stopped looking. She nodded as if she expected that. Then turned her eyes back toward the window. I didn't think you would remember, she said softly. They promised you wouldn't. They tried. We sat in silence for a moment, broken only by the soft hum of the vent. She looked at me again. Her eyes were clearer than I'd expected. There was no wildness in them. Just exhaustion. And something like relief. I tried to tell you, she said. Back at the cabin. I know. I left everything where I thought you'd find it. I didn't know how long I had. You said his name was Michael. Her eyes closed slowly. He felt real. In here. She pressed her palm against her chest. They gave him to me, and I loved him. Every part of him. The smell of his skin. The sound of his breathing. The way he gripped my finger. My heart stung. But he wasn't. She opened her eyes. Don't say that. I stayed quiet. You didn't want to remember, she said. They said if you forgot, it would hurt less. But it didn't. Not for me. I sat across from her now. Why did we do it, Eva? Her gaze dropped to the floor. Because we were broken. Because I couldn't live with what happened. And neither could you. I remember the loss, I said. The real one. The ultrasound. The silence. She nodded. So do I. That's why I needed something else to fill it. Even if it was a lie. They said it was a treatment. It was a trial, she corrected. Experimental. Off the books. That's what Black Hollow is. A graveyard for people who volunteered to forget. Why didn't they wipe it from you too? She smiled again, bitterly this time. Because I fought it. I clung to every shred of him. Even when it started to crack. I saw things that didn't line up. I remembered different versions of the same day. They called it memory fatigue. I called it hell. I swallowed hard. Why call me now, after all this time? Because I knew if I left you a trail, you'd follow it. I needed someone else to remember. To carry part of him. Otherwise, he disappears completely. She leaned forward, took my hand. Her skin was warm. Do you remember the lullaby I used to hum? She asked. I nodded. You sang it while folding baby clothes. You used to say the baby would remember your voice. Even that was fabricated, she whispered. They implanted the memory in both of us. I felt sick. But the feeling, she said. The ache. The love. That was real. And no one can take that. I gripped her hand tighter. You're coming with me. She laughed quietly. I'm not allowed out. Not after the last time I ran. Then we'll make noise, I said. We'll show the world what they're doing here. They'll deny it, she said. They'll erase the files. Burn the paper. Alter the records. I looked into her eyes. Then we don't leave with paper. We leave with the truth. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Our time was up. The door creaked open. The woman from before stood there, her expression unreadable. Mr. Hensley. We're done for today. Eva let go of my hand slowly. Her fingers lingered on my palm like she wasn't sure if this was the last time. I'll be back, I said. You better be. I stood. Walked to the door. Then turned back one last time. Was Michael ever real to you? I asked. She smiled faintly. He still is. And then I stepped out. The door closed. And behind it, the part of my life I'd once chosen to forget waited quietly in room 3B. But I remembered now. And I wasn't going to stop. Part 8, What We Buried in Winter. I drove away from Black Hollow with no plan. No documents. No recordings. Nothing to prove what I'd seen or what Eva had said. Just the memory of her voice. The warmth of her hand. And the ache of a child I never held. Michael. A name whispered in a false life, but real enough to live inside us both. That night, I sat alone in a roadside motel. Cheap bed, cracked walls, a yellow glow seeping through the curtains. I watched the ceiling fan spin slowly and thought about how much we forget without even meaning to. And how much we remember when we're not supposed to. They tried to wipe the truth. But something in me refused to let go of her. Of him. Of the days that never happened but still shaped me. That's the cruel thing about grief, it doesn't care what's real. It just wants something to hold. I opened my notebook. Wrote down everything I could remember. Eva's words. The bracelet. The photos. The false memory we once agreed to live inside. I wrote until my hand cramped and the pages were heavy with ink. Then I went home. Not to the cabin. Not yet. To Nora. She opened the door in silence, as if she'd been expecting me. I saw her, I said. Nora didn't ask questions. She just stepped aside and let me in. We sat at her kitchen table, the same spot where she'd first told me Eva was gone. I handed her the notebook. She remembers everything, I said. And she wants someone else to carry it. Nora turned a few pages, tears welling in her eyes. Is she safe? For now. We talked for hours. About what happened. About the things we both believed, and the ones we still doubted. At some point, she reached for a box in the cupboard and slid it across the table. She left this for you, she said. Told me not to open it. Inside was a single cassette tape. Old. Labeled in Eva's handwriting, for James, after. I borrowed Nora's cassette player. Slid the tape in. Hit play. Then I heard her voice. Soft. Slow. Like she was sitting beside me again. James, if you're hearing this, I guess you remembered more than they wanted you to. Or maybe you just never stopped loving me enough to go looking. Either way, thank you. I don't know what the truth is anymore. I don't know if Michael was ever real. But I know what I felt. I know what you felt. And I know they took something from us. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was a lie. But it mattered. And if something matters, even for a little while, then it deserves to be remembered. I'll never ask you to forgive me. For choosing to forget. Or for wanting to remember. But I hope you know, loving you was the one thing they couldn't rewrite. I love you still. The tape ended in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat there, listening to the hum of the player, letting the stillness settle around me. Eva was still in that place. Locked away. But not lost. And I wasn't forgetting again. A week later, I returned to the cabin. The snow had melted, but the cold still lingered in the corners. I opened the windows. Let the air in. Then I walked to the attic and placed the scarf, her scarf, back on the rafter. Not tied. Just resting. A memory, not a warning. Before I left, I lit a fire. Sat in the armchair where I had once waited for a ghost. I pulled out the photograph of the three of us, me, Eva, and the child we might have had. And for the first time, I didn't question it. I let myself feel what I needed to feel. Not because it was real. But because it was ours. And some truths don't need to be verified. Just remembered. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. I don't know if I'll ever hear her voice, or if someone will come knocking in the night to take the rest of what I remember. But I do know this. They tried to erase us. But what we buried in winter, I've carried into spring.